The last thought on your mind would be
the Speaker at prayer.
Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, we, thine unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thine heavenly wisdom from above to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thine fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affection, the result of all our counsel may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace and tranquility on the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
This Honourable House now resumes its sitting. Call of the roll.
Mrs. Holness, Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Holness, Dr. Clark, Dr. Chang, Mr. Montague, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Samuda, Ms. Grange, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Malahoo Fort, Dr. Tufton, Mr. Mackenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Charles, Mr. Green, Mr. Terry Long, Miss Smith, Mr. Main, Dr. Dunn, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Holness,
Here.
Mr. Morgan, Mr. Davis, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown-Burke, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Clark, Mr. Cousins, Ms. Crawford, Ms. Daly, Ms. Davis, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Henriquez, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Ms. Lee, Mr. Miller, Ms. Morrison, Ms. Nita, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Sibbles, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Witter, Mr. Wright.
Statements by ministers, announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today is the following. Ministry Paper number 19 of 2021. and annual report of the Rural Agricultural Development Authority for the year 2016-2017.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions. Dr. Brownberg.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the expiration of 21 days, I will ask the Minister of Education the following question.
Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to sittings of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business.
Madam Speaker, the main item on public business today will be the continuation of the budget debate, and the Speaker will be the member from South St. Andrew and Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, today I rise to make my first budget presentation as Leader of the Opposition. I thank the Almighty God for the honor to serve in this position of great responsibility, for good health and strength at a time in which life feels so fragile, and for the support I continue to receive from my family, friends, colleagues, and the people of Jamaica. I must always honor my late father, Professor John Golding, and my dear mother, Lady Golding. They provided a foundation of integrity and service to those who need it, which has become like a beacon to guide me through this journey of life. I must also say a special word of thanks to my wife, Sandra. I am privileged to share my life with a lady whose love has empowered me to undertake the sacrifices of public service. Always and forever, babes. I also bless up my 3 children. You have shown patience and adaptability in coping with the challenges that public life often requires a family to endure. Your belief in me resolves any uncertainties or hesitations I may ever experience, and you bring great joy to my life. To my South St. Andrew executive team, including our councillors and councillor candidates, and my entire South St. Andrew family, respect and thanks for choosing me to represent you in this Parliament. It is an honor to serve you, to share with you, and to learn from you. I thank our opposition MPs for their solidarity and guidance, and also my colleagues on the other side of the aisle for their collegiality and good humor. I acknowledge and thank the acting clerk, to the House of Parliament and her staff, who always allow our work as parliamentarians to go on, no matter how difficult the circumstances. The team at the Office of the Leader of the Opposition brings a cheerful vibe to each day, even as they go beyond the call of duty to deliver on every task at hand. I thank them for making our work so enjoyable. Madam Speaker, I owe a debt of gratitude to the great leaders who have preceded me, and I will mention those who are still with us. The Most Honourable P.J. Patterson, who is always willing to lend a listening ear and offers such wise counsel. His first-hand knowledge of our country's post-war political history is unparalleled. The Most Honourable Portia Simpson Miller, who appointed me as Senator back in 2007 and later a Minister in her administration from 2012 to 2016. She is an icon of achievement and a truly special person, and I particularly honour her on this occasion during Women's History Month. Dr. Peter Phillips, for choosing me to serve as his spokesperson on finance throughout his tenure as leader of the opposition. It has been a pleasure to work alongside him and a privilege to benefit from his immense knowledge and experience. And last but not least, a special thank you goes out to our party workers and all the members of our political movement. Your tireless work in support of our vision for Jamaica is a constant source of energy and inspiration to press forward together. Madam Speaker, I wish to begin this presentation by saying a few words about the role of the opposition at this time in our history. Some people may be of the view that it is the business of an opposition to oppose for its own sake. We on this side do not hold that view. A developing country such as Jamaica cannot afford that approach when so much of the success of our young nation depends on harnessing the national will to achieve our national goals. We must support actions which we agree with and be willing to assist the government of the day with proposals and suggestions which we believe can make Jamaica stronger. We say, powerful together. On the other hand, it is also our responsibility on this side of the House to be constantly alert for infringements of guaranteed freedoms or other abuses of power. We must be vigilant and strident in responding to maladministration and corruption wherever it is identified. And we must be rigorous in criticizing policies and actions which do not contribute to national development. We must do these things with courage and with our full commitment. Our democratic system has brought us this far without losing the freedoms and openness that Jamaicans hold dear. It depends on the opposition to strike the right balance between the two aspects of our constitutional role. I trust that, with God's guidance, we will maintain that balance and continue to contribute constructively to Jamaica's development. Madam Speaker, this budget debate is happening at a time when our country is deep in crisis. The pandemic has been allowed to get out of control, and the healthcare system is buckling as a result. The economy... The economy is also in a tailspin, with negative growth of over 11% expected for this fiscal year. That is by far the largest contraction of the economy in a single year in Jamaica's recorded history. Over 100,000 Jamaicans have lost their jobs. And the society is in crisis. Crime is also out of control. People are being murdered this year at an even higher rate than last year. Domestic violence continues to be a problem. And there is a general collapse of moral norms, discipline, and behavioral standards, which as a nation we must address. Madam Speaker, this is therefore a time of immense danger for our country, but it can also be a time of great opportunity. We should use the lessons presented by this crisis to reset the status quo rather than just yearning for a return to the ways of the past. We must identify new and better ways of tackling the challenges that impair our national progress. Only we, all of us together and united, can decide whether we learn from the crisis or we yield to the crisis as we face the future. The government, Madam Speaker, has the responsibility to lead. That is why it has been elected. They have the democratic obligation to marshal the entire society towards building Vision 2030's mission, a Jamaica which is a place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. This means that the elected opposition must be meaningfully engaged by the government if the country is to secure the great future contemplated by Vision 2030. We therefore regret that the Vale Royal talks, commenced by our predecessors on both sides, have been laid to rest. Those meetings allowed the government and opposition to discuss important matters affecting our country and to develop a consensus where possible. In a similar vein, Madam Speaker, the removal of opposition members from chairing most of the parliamentary oversight committees after the 2020 general election was a retrograde step. We do not accept it, and civil society does not support it. It has weakened the system of checks and balances on which an accountable and transparent democracy depends. Prime Minister, I call on you once again to reinstate the convention that was established by Prime Minister Bruce Golding in 2007 and was maintained by both sides up to September 2020. It is the right thing to do. Madam Speaker, the history of the government's attempts to implement the National Identification System, NIDS, teaches the importance of working together. Both sides had long recognized the importance of establishing a national identification system for Jamaica. That understanding emerged decades ago when we first started to work together to build a world-class electoral system to secure our democracy. However, the route taken by the government in pursuing the NIDS legislation was unwise from the very start. With both houses making over 200 amendments to the NIDS bill, it was obvious that something was very wrong with that bill. We strongly advised them to send it to a joint select committee for a comprehensive review. The government adamantly refused to do that. Instead, they rushed to pass the bill. We had a duty to pursue a legal action in the Constitutional Court to protect Jamaica, and the legislation was duly struck down in its totality. That could and should have been avoided, but because the government chose to proceed unilaterally, much time and effort have been wasted. 3 years later, a completely new bill is now before a joint select committee of this House, of this Parliament, being reviewed in detail by both sides, as was always the correct approach. Mr. Prime Minister, the lack of an effective channel of dialogue between our two sides is not good for Jamaica. The government and opposition have not even had a single meeting since I became the leader of the opposition. We should restart the Vale Royal talks. The nation needs us to work together to tackle the current crisis. Mr. Prime Minister, I urge you, do the right thing. Madam Speaker, Jamaica has benefited from consistency in economic policy over the last 8 years. In this era, so-called fiscal consolidation has been the mantra to achieve debt sustainability. Essentially, Jamaica has been running high primary surpluses and a balanced fiscal budget to reduce the public debt. This has been buttressed by the legislation of a fiscal responsibility framework, which has within it specific fiscal rules. The motivation of all this is to get the country out of the debt trap, where most of the budget has been consumed by interest payments and public sector wages, instead of social programs and public investments to drive national development. This important fiscal discipline has been supported by a series of reforms that were agreed with the IMF to make the economy more efficient and competitive. Most significantly, perhaps, the system of tax administration and collection has been modernized and improved. This has yielded tremendous increases in revenues to the government. Tax revenues have grown significantly more than inflation since 2015. It was also agreed with the IMF to pursue complementary reforms to the monetary policy framework through legislation to make price stability the central bank's principal objective. This commitment resulted in the 2020 amendments to the Bank of Jamaica Act. Madam Speaker, there has been consistent bipartisan cooperation on these efforts, both here in Parliament and behind the scenes. Jamaica has been the better for it. This shows the possibilities for rapid progress in other areas through the resumption of the Vale Royal talks. Nevertheless, we must remember that macroeconomic stability is not an end in itself. The objective is to provide more options for government to pursue the policy objectives of its choice. That is the essence of economic independence, which the Right Excellent Norman Washington Manley, in his last address to an annual party conference in 1968, recognized as a mission of the next generation. Madam Speaker, with Jamaica's economy shrinking by over 11% during the past fiscal year, the debt-to-GDP ratio has naturally worsened. Our economy was particularly vulnerable. The tourism industry, which directly and indirectly comprises over 30% of our economy, has been substantially impacted. Related sectors, such as entertainment, sports, and transportation, have been shut down or hit very hard. The impact of this crisis on ordinary Jamaicans has been devastating. The impact on women in low-income households has been particularly harsh. The World Food Programme survey, published in September last year, September 2020, reported that in Jamaica, 7 in 10 persons were having difficulties eating enough during the crisis. 7 in 10 persons suffered a job loss or reduction in income. 1 in 3 persons was skipping meals or eating less. 2 in 10 had no food at home, and 1 in 10 was going a full day without food. Since then, Madam Speaker, a January 2021 report from the U.S. Department of Agriculture has revealed that over 400,000 persons in Jamaica are currently food insecure. This food insecurity is double their pre-COVID projections and is primarily found in female-headed households with at least 1 child. Indeed, Madam Speaker, households with children have been hit the hardest in the pandemic. The Caribbean Policy Research Institute, CAPRI, found that 45% of households with children in Jamaica now suffer a shortage of food. It is even higher at 56% for female-headed households. These households are coping by eating smaller meals or eating fewer meals per day. As a Member of Parliament, Madam Speaker, I am sure that I am not alone in seeing firsthand the pressure that the people are under. We now receive daily requests for help just to buy food. This did not happen before the pandemic. I will share with you, Madam Speaker, a message that was recently sent to me by a young mother in my constituency, and it is typical in its description of the situation that is faced by so many right now. She told me, and I quote, "I'm still having it very hard and can't even afford the internet for their online classes. I would do great with a little help, please, sir. I'm trying to do a small business so I can find food for my family, but it has been such a struggle to keep going. Sometimes I can't even buy my goods because we have to feed from it. And every time I try to add something else to the table, I fail. Sometimes I feel like just giving up, but I know these kids are depending on me, so I am seeking help to support them." End of quote. Madam Speaker, the CARE program launched last year was the government's primary response to this socio-economic crisis. However, it provided less than 1% of GDP of direct assistance to vulnerable Jamaicans and businesses. Path beneficiaries received 1 month's extra benefit. The pre-COVID unemployed received a single payment of $10,000, and that was over 8 months ago. As regards businesses, the government chose to make formalization a condition of accessing assistance. This approach effectively ensured that many micro and small business owners were unable to access any assistance under the CARE program. This outcome was entirely predictable, given the high level of informality in the Jamaican economy. What is more, Madam Speaker, many people who qualified and applied for assistance under the CARE program are still waiting to receive it. In the tourism sector, there are hotel workers and craft vendors who have not been paid the assistance for which they applied. Similarly, small hotels have been unable to access the financing that they were told was to be provided for them by the Exim Bank. The transport sector has the same story. Last year, owners and operators of public passenger vehicles were promised $25,000 or $40,000, depending on their category. They applied for this, many of them from June last year. To date, however, not a cent has been paid out to many of these taxi and bus operators. They are suffering great economic distress. The pandemic has reduced travel due to school closures, working from home, and the curfew. Taxis are required to carry one less passenger, which has automatically reduced their income. And the price of gasoline has risen every week for the past 3 months. I'm calling on the government, Madam Speaker, to fulfill its promises to these hotel workers and transport operators. Madam Speaker, the annual budget is the government's opportunity to change priorities and adjust policies. This is when the government should alter its direction if experience and data show that their approach is failing to meet the needs of the people. At this time of crisis, people must be the priority. People must be at the center of policy. However, in the face of the deep economic and social crisis, the approach of the government has been to continue its tight embrace of fiscal conservatism. In the face of this devastating crisis on the people, the response of the government has, in our view, been timid and inadequate. The budget for the coming fiscal year only makes provision for $8 billion, which is less than half of 1% of GDP, in direct COVID-related social support for vulnerable Jamaicans. This is half of the amount provided in the last fiscal year now ending, which itself proved to be far too little. This budget, Madam Speaker, does not do right by the Jamaican people, especially the poor, those earning low wages, the unemployed, the elders struggling to survive on a meager NIS pension that has not been increased since 2018. And it is not just individuals who are struggling. Service industries, especially tourism, entertainment, transport, and sports, have been hit badly. In those sectors, businesses, both large and small, now have their backs to the wall. The loan moratorium, which was made available to some of them, has come to an end, but their cash flows have not recovered. These businesses need help from the government to survive. Jamaica's economic recovery requires their survival. However, the government has only allocated $5 billion, roughly 0.25% of GDP or 0.25% of GDP for business support in the budget. This will not be nearly sufficient, given the scale and likely duration of the impact on these businesses. Madam Speaker, in contrast, the average expenditure on COVID relief in the OECD countries, those are the rich countries of the world, is 5.8% of GDP. Some, such as the USA and the UK, have provided over 15% of GDP on COVID-related expenditure. And many developing countries have spent at least 3% of GDP to help their populations get through the crisis. Madam Speaker, sometimes you must take one step back to make two steps forward. I support the call of our Shadow Minister of Finance, the member for South East St. Andrew, for the government to spend an additional $21.5 billion, or about 1% of GDP, to fund an adequate program of support. The focus of this additional support must be spending on the vulnerable sections of the population and assisting businesses, especially the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises that are struggling to survive. This additional support would also serve as a significant stimulus to the Jamaican economy. People who receive this assistance would spend it on food and other basic needs of life, multiplying the flow of money throughout the economy. It would help to reverse the negative growth more rapidly and reduce the impact on the debt-to-GDP ratio. Madam Speaker, the Shadow Minister of Finance last Thursday outlined how we would spend these additional resources. All of these amounts would be in addition to what the government has budgeted, and I wish to repeat them today. $5 billion of additional support for individuals and households, with a special allocation for female-headed households. $5 billion of additional support for micro and small businesses, with loans and grants supported by business development and financial literacy training. $3 billion of additional support for farmers, including more of the buyback programs for their surplus produce and also small-scale irrigation systems. $3.2 billion more for a comprehensive broadband rollout, prioritizing connecting communities and schools, especially in rural areas and deprived inner-city communities. $2.3 billion more for a renewable energy an energy efficiency program for households with a loan facility for energy-saving devices, $2 billion more for incentive pay for healthcare workers, and $1 billion more for island-wide digital literacy training. Madam Speaker, this additional support and stimulus package of at least 1% of GDP would be financed by a reduction in the primary surplus target from 6% to 5%. We would support a further suspension or adjustment of the fiscal rules to facilitate this. The legislation of the Fiscal Responsibility Framework provides for this, where the economy is impacted by a severe shock, as it clearly is now. Madam Speaker, our approach is a strategic response that would more comprehensively protect the population from the ravages of the economic contraction. It would ensure a speedier economic recovery for the country. It would give some hope to the Jamaican people, and it would reduce the mounting social tensions, which have the potential of manifesting in unpleasant and damaging episodes that we would be wise to try to avoid. Madam Speaker, the pandemic has shown the importance of building greater resilience. This includes rebalancing our heavy reliance on tourism, which experience has shown to be vulnerable to a variety of factors over which we have no control. Our proposals, Madam Speaker, are not mere band-aids or handouts. They are strategic investments in the Jamaican people and the society as a whole. Our proposed investments in broadband, agriculture, expanding digital penetration, and promoting digital literacy would help to retool and reposition the Jamaican economy. They would build greater economic resilience by upgrading and leveraging our tech infrastructure and skills. They would position Jamaica to function at a significantly improved level of economic performance in a post-pandemic world when that comes. Madam Speaker, our approach is consistent with our proven commitment to achieving debt sustainability. It will let us recover faster and stronger to resume the debt reduction path to which we are all committed. Madam Speaker, a substantial portion of the funding of this coming year's budget is to come in the form of a $33 billion dividend from the Bank of Jamaica, BOJ, which the Minister of Finance has said will be paid to the government in the first week of April. He also indicated that the 2020 amendments to the Bank of Jamaica Act, which I've already referred to, will be brought into effect in April, on the 16th of April, I think he said. That would be after the dividend is paid. The Minister told us that this $33 billion dividend is being paid out of the profits made by the BOJ in the years 2018, 2019, and 2020. He has been ecstatic about this dividend and proclaims that it is the fruits of sound policy. There is a point I wish to make about this. Madam Speaker, when one examines the audited financial statements of the BOJ, one discovers that the profits for those 3 years from foreign exchange trading and from net gains in Jamaican dollar terms on the Bank of Jamaica's holdings of foreign currency assets were as follows: $6.3 billion in 2018, $7.3 billion in 2019, and $4.3 billion in 2020. This totals 17.9 billion Jamaican dollars. Therefore, Madam Speaker, $17.9 billion, which is 52% or more than half of the Bank of Jamaica's $34.7 billion of profits over those 3 years, came from foreign exchange trading and from net gains on the Bank of Jamaica's holdings of foreign currency assets. The Minister told us last week that only about 20% of BOJ's profits over the 3 years, 2018 through 2020, came from realized foreign exchange gains. However, he did not mention that in addition to that, over 30% of the Bank of Jamaica's profits for the 3 years came from unrealized foreign exchange gains. And Madam Speaker, what is the main source of these unrealized foreign exchange gains? The Bank of Jamaica's assets are predominantly, that is 2/3, comprised of foreign currency assets, which greatly exceed the value of the central bank's foreign currency liabilities. This means that Bank of Jamaica has...
The Leader of the Opposition's time for speaking has expired.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the Leader of the Opposition's time be extended sufficiently to allow him to complete his presentation.
Those in favor? Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Thank you, House Leader. Thank you, Madam Speaker. What is the main source of these unrealized foreign exchange gains? The Bank of Jamaica's assets are predominantly, 2/3 in fact, comprised of foreign currency assets, which greatly exceed the value of the Bank of Jamaica's foreign currency liabilities. This means that the BOJ has a very substantial long position in foreign currency. And as the Jamaican dollar depreciates in value over the 3-year period, the Bank of Jamaica made massive foreign currency gains from this long position. So in essence, the Bank of Jamaica has profited from the volatility and devaluation of the Jamaican currency over the 3 years. This is the same devaluation which has made life harder for the Jamaican people. The devaluation of the Jamaican dollar, Madam Speaker, effectively operates as a tax on the purchasing power of the Jamaican people. the majority of whom live off a fixed Jamaican dollar income. Madam Speaker, rice, flour, cooking oil, mackerel, medicine, and other basic necessities of life that are imported into Jamaica have all gone up very substantially over this period, in large part because of the same devaluation that has resulted in these profits for the Bank of Jamaica. The Shadow Minister of Finance graphically showed these increases since 2016 in his excellent budget speech last Thursday. And Madam Speaker, I have a basket here, you see. The food in it don't even top the basket. It don't even top the basket. But it was purchased from a grocery. I think it's the same grocery you bought your basket from the last time. But it don't have no fish back in there. No fish back not in there. Because them never have no fish back. But let me tell you, this is what the 10,000, let me tell you what this come to. $10,018.66, and that includes $673.91 of GCT. So they're only getting goods really worth $9,344.75. But this is what it can buy. One loaf of bread. Six Pampers. One roll of toilet paper. 2 pounds of flour, 2 pounds of rice, 2 pounds of sugar, and 2 pounds of cornmeal. 1 tin of Clim baby powder, 2 tin of mackerel, and 1 tin of sardine. 1 little bottle of cooking oil. Hand sanitizer. 1 tin of corned beef. Sanitizer and 2 little instant. Madam Speaker, that $10,000, that little food there, 2 tin of this. Yeah. Madam Speaker, that little food in there can't even top the basket. Can't even top the basket. And that $10,000 worth of goods was all that the persons who needed help last year, that is what they were given to survive on by the government 8 months ago. That can't feed a family for more than a couple weeks maximum, and probably less. You'd have to be really economizing if you were to try and survive on that. So, Madam Speaker, this devaluation disproportionately hurts low-income people. Madam Speaker, we must remember that $10,000 is about $68 US now. That's what it is now. So that is really what the people of Jamaica have been given by the government to survive COVID. Anyway, Madam Speaker, this devaluation of the currency over the 3 years has disproportionately hurt low-income people. Their wages have not kept pace with the rate of these increases in the devaluation of the currency. People with investable income can invest in assets like real estate or shares that increase in value as the currency weakens. But low-income Jamaicans have not been able to make those investments. They are suffering the full brunt of these massive price increases on the items that they rely on to survive. Madam Speaker, in using the $17.9 billion of foreign exchange gains from the Bank of Jamaica to fund its budget, the government is essentially treating the devaluation as a form of tax. It is a regressive, indirect form of taxation paid in particular by less well-off Jamaicans. Madam Speaker, the minister has boasted that this is a result of good policy. That would suggest that it was a deliberate strategy. It has further impoverished those Jamaicans who can least afford it. And that, Madam Speaker, is the bitterest form of non-prosperity anyone can imagine. How can it be good policy? Madam Speaker, the minister proclaimed with great joy that there will be no new taxes this coming year. But the Jamaican people have effectively paid already the tax to the extent of $17.9 billion through the devaluation, which has driven those foreign exchange gains for the Bank of Jamaica that has funded that dividend. Those gains in foreign exchange from the devaluation account for over half of the $33 billion dividend which the minister is relying on to finance the budget. Madam Speaker, I move to health care. It was a polio epidemic in the 1950s, Madam Speaker, that led to my father setting down his roots in Jamaica. And in that sense, one could say that the eradication of polio was why I was born and bred here. Jamaica is now confronted by another more devastating health crisis, this time of unprecedented proportions. And Madam Speaker, I should make the point that polio was eradicated through a vaccine. The polio vaccine, it's a drop. Madam Speaker, I implore all Jamaicans to get vaccinated as and when it becomes available. There is a lot of misinformation being spread around, a lot of fear and anxiety. But this COVID is a deadly disease, and our people are dying daily from it. So please, listen to the information from the Ministry of Health, from the World Health Organization, and do what you need to do to protect yourselves and your families by getting vaccinated when it becomes available. Madam Speaker, the government was initially commended for a fine start in responding to COVID-19. Unfortunately, some serious mistakes were then made, which have given deadly impetus to the spread of the virus in Jamaica. In August, the Prime Minister decided to call an early general election in the middle of a COVID spike, and this resulted in community spread taking hold in the country. And it was announced, the community spread was announced on the day after the election. Then in December, boy, when they throw a hug in a bit, I tell you about it, yeah, so you go, you know it lick, you know it lick. Then in December, Madam Speaker, returning Jamaicans were allowed to come here in droves without first producing a negative COVID test, and the quarantine rules were not effectively enforced. Madam Speaker, due to these bad policy decisions, COVID-19 was allowed to get out of control in Jamaica, and it now threatens our way of life and very existence. On February the 22nd this year, the New York Times newspaper reported data showing that in the preceding 28 days, Jamaica had recorded the second highest rate of increase in infections in a group of 23 selected countries from around the world. Irrespective of what the Minister of Health and Wellness says, the reality is that our daily number of confirmed cases has been hitting unprecedented levels week after week. The health system is now reeling under the pressure. Hospitals are bursting at the seams, and many patients have not been able to find beds. Reports are that over 200 nurses have contracted COVID, and that is on top of the 271 nurses who reportedly left the health system last year, and the over 100 more who have already reportedly left it this year. And critically, oxygen is reportedly in short supply. The people of Western Jamaica continue to suffer from the debacle at the Cornwall Regional Hospital. It has been under renovation from 2017 and is still nowhere near complete. There has been no accountability for the lack of proper oversight of that project, poor project management, bureaucratic bungling, and significant cost overruns. No accountability, Madam Speaker. All we get from the Minister is the usual PR about the facility functioning adequately. But this is far from reality. One only has to ask the people of Montego Bay, Trelawney, Hanover, Westmoreland, and St. Elizabeth about the awful challenges they face when they have to go there for treatment. Madam Speaker, the citizens of Western Jamaica deserve better. Madam Speaker, on behalf of all of us in this House, I wish to express gratitude and appreciation to the doctors, nurses, ancillary staff, community health aides, and other healthcare workers who are in the trenches every day fighting to save the Jamaican people. They are today's heroes and heroines who have been giving service beyond the call of duty in the most adverse circumstances. We salute them. Madam Speaker, we also deeply regret the spate of tragic stories of persons dying because of the weakened and overburdened healthcare system. They shall not be forgotten or ignored. There was 17-year-old Jalissa McGowan who died from an asthma attack after she was reportedly refused treatment at the University Hospital. There was 32-year-old Shanae Spencer, a nurse with the Cancer Society, who died at the Kingston Public Hospital in circumstances which have necessitated an investigation. Her cry of "need help, get help, my body is weak, my battery is dead," in a voicemail to her sister, foretold of her untimely passing. We will not forget 102-year-old Ida McKenzie, who died at St. Anne's Bay Hospital after reportedly sitting in a wheelchair for more than 24 hours before she was assigned a bed, and only after her family persisted. And Madam Speaker, a female inmate died at the South Camp Adult Correctional Facility. We don't know her name, but there was a COVID outbreak there among the female prisoners who are in overcrowded conditions. No decision has been made to grant early release of inmates who have not been convicted of violent offenses. And Madam Speaker, that raises serious human rights issues. Madam Speaker, the Jamaican people are now tired, frustrated, and angry. The government has run out of ideas. It has been merely tweaking the same old measures, which are clearly not working, in the face of a torrent of positive cases and mounting hospitalizations. The only hope for getting us out of this crisis is a comprehensive vaccination program to achieve herd immunity as quickly as possible. And this means vaccinating about 70% of our population. Madam Speaker, the government was tardy in initiating the process of sourcing vaccines. Nothing was done to seek bilateral arrangements with suppliers until mid-January, after I and others reacted with alarm to the minister's announcement that the government's target was to vaccinate a mere 16% of the population in the first year. Thank God we were able to receive 50,000 vaccines gifted by India as part of its Vaccine Matrix initiative. This is a shining example. This initiative by India is a shining example of the type of developmental assistance within the global South that our late party leader, Michael Manley, advocated for. We take this opportunity to express our deep gratitude to the government and people of India for this assistance. Madam Speaker, while it was a valuable first step, I have called for a high-level task force with an appropriate mix of expertise and experience, headed by the Prime Minister himself, to guide the procurement of vaccines for the Jamaican people. This call has not even been paid the courtesy of a response. The nation is confronted by a situation which demands all hands on deck, and that is the way we should respond to it. However, as it stands today, the National Health Fund has been left on its own to try to procure the vaccines that the country needs. They are competing against many other countries in the world without the benefit of this task force to help open doors with suppliers and guide the procurement strategy. And Madam Speaker, there is now another matter arising. The issue of how vaccines are distributed is fundamental, as it is a matter of life or death for many people, especially the elderly and those with comorbidities. The government must ensure that the rollout of the national vaccination program is rapid, is logical, is data-driven, and most of all, is equitable. In keeping with the principle of equity, Madam Speaker, the guiding objectives should be the minimizing of deaths and serious illness from this disease and ensuring fairness in who gets vaccinated and when. We should not have people skipping the line, as occurred in the very first week of the vaccination program, despite the Prime Minister's promises to the contrary. Regrettably, this embarrassing breach of protocol is exactly what many Jamaicans expected in a country that is too often organized around the needs of a few and not the many. We have called for this breach to be audited to determine its nature and extent. And Madam Speaker, we heard just a while ago that there's now been a theft or a batch of vaccines has gone missing from Cornwall Regional Hospital. That was in the midday news today. Well, whatever it is, it's one too many. More fundamentally, in order to save lives, Madam Speaker, in order to save lives, vulnerable groups must be vaccinated first, and the rest of us should come after. And within the vulnerable groups, the prioritization of any particular group should be based on the relative vulnerability of that group. This is how countries with the most rapid and successful COVID vaccination programs have done it. Given the life or death implications of vaccination, I see no moral justification for the non-vulnerable population being divided into phases 2 and 3 in the vaccination plan, with certain industries getting ahead of other industries and ahead of everybody else. I think that approach offends the principle of equity, and I would ask the Minister to review it. Madam Speaker, I must say something about the education system. The education system has been devastated by the pandemic. Hundreds of thousands of students have received very little education since school closed in March last year, a year ago. The attempts that have been made to provide alternative channels in the absence of face-to-face classes have not gone far enough. The result is a damagingly high level of educational exclusion. The structural inequality in education in Jamaica is sometimes described as a system of educational apartheid. It has worsened with the use of virtual platforms to replace face-to-face learning here. Children from low-income families have been particularly badly affected. For them, the lack of adequate devices and internet connectivity have been the norm rather than the exception. Madam Speaker, in rural areas and low-income urban communities, far too many students have been unable to participate in the online learning because they have no access to the necessary devices or the internet or both. Many children are now on the streets ramping during school hours. Some have joined the workforce in an effort to help feed their families. They may never come back into formal schooling without a targeted intervention. The consequences, Madam Speaker, will be severe for them and for the entire society. Experts are warning that some children deprived of school because of COVID-19 are going to end up in crime. At the tertiary level, our major universities and colleges face severe financial challenges. Their students are also not immune to this economic downturn. The rate of deregistration and dropping out has climbed dramatically. In this context, there have been calls to repeat the school year starting next September so that the learning loss can be recovered. There seems to be merit in this, though consequential arrangements would need to be made for those students who are ready to move up and for the little ones who will be entering the school system. Madam Speaker, we will hear what the strategy will be for bringing the educational system out of this crisis. I now want to say something, Madam Speaker, about the structure of Jamaican society. Inequality flowed from Jamaica's colonial experience. The People's National Party, from its outset in 1938, set out their national agenda in terms of a fairer and better deal for the Jamaican people, especially the majority, without the benefit of generational wealth. In 1971, in his contribution to the budget debate of that year, the then leader of the opposition, Michael Manley, said, and I quote, "We have got to realize, first of all, that if we genuinely mean the motto, out of one people, we must recognize that the motto is not part of the social experience of the people at large. With all that may have developed in politics, the fact is that in social terms, Jamaica is a divided society. We must understand that until all the youths in this country find the level at which their oneness is manifest in action, we perpetuate the social divisions that bedevil this country." Madam Speaker, we remain committed to reducing inequality. We see it as a historical duty to build on the legacy of our ancestors, heroes and heroines, whose blood, sweat, and tears brought our nation out of slavery and colonialism. This is why the PNP led the struggle for adult suffrage, so that all adults in Jamaica have the right to vote, and set the agenda for political independence. Madam Speaker, despite the efforts made over many years, Jamaica is still plagued by high levels of income and wealth inequality. This inequality is manifest in the vast disparity of outcomes in the primary and secondary school systems, in the availability and standard of health care, in access to proper housing and basic amenities such as working sewage systems, street lighting, garbage disposal, and indeed in access to justice. Madam Speaker, sustainable economic and social development is not possible without deliberately building a more just and fair society. If we just ignore the fundamental problem of excessive inequality of income and wealth in this country, whatever social cohesion remains will give way to frustration, bitterness, and resentment. The commitment to reducing inequality offers our society the best platform to unleash the talents and potential of the entire population. This is especially true of vulnerable and excluded groups, such as persons living with disabilities, the elderly, people without titles for land, people who live in unplanned communities, and young people struggling for access to higher education. Madam Speaker, excessive inequality is linked with crime and insecurity, lower economic growth, and poor health and other outcomes. It is bad for all of us. Madam Speaker, Oxfam and the Development Financial International produce the Commitment to Reduce Inequality, CRI, Index. It ranks countries on performance in 3 areas: labor rights, taxation, policy, and social protection. This index in 2020 ranked Jamaica behind the other Caribbean countries and lowly placed in the global community. The 2018 index had ranked Jamaica's commitment to reducing inequality as 96th in the world. Bad and not so bad. 2 years on, that ranking significantly worsened. The 2020 index saw Jamaica fall into 124th in the world, and we ranked 21st out of 23 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. The 2020 report, Madam Speaker, urged government action to radically reduce inequality. Similarly, Madam Speaker, the 2017 Jamaica Survey of Living Conditions, which was produced by the PIOJ, and the 2017 Survey of Living Conditions is the most recent such survey that we have, found, and I quote, inequality at a similar level to 2008, at the height of the global recession, and also stated that, and I quote, inequality remains a persistent problem as the data show fairly consistent wide disparities between the richest and the poorest groups in several indicators, close quote. Madam Speaker, that survey pointed out the following manifestations of the very high levels of inequality in Jamaica. 4 of every 10 households in the poorest 20% of the population still use pit latrines. 7 of 10 households in the poorest 20% had no access to internet or computers, and that compares with 3 out of 10 in the wealthiest 20%. Only 4 out of 100, 4% in the poorest 20% of the population had health insurance, compared to 40% of the wealthiest 20%. 6 out of 10 older persons, 60 and over, 6 out of 10 were not receiving a pension. And those receiving pensions, about a third received less than $10,000 per month. Over 700,000 Jamaicans were living in overcrowded settlements with no clean water, inadequate sanitization, no access roads, high unemployment, high school dropouts, as well as serious health and environmental problems. And Madam Speaker, in terms of work, most Jamaicans are either unemployed or informally employed and do not benefit from paid leave, maternity leave, sick leave, and NIS or private pension arrangements. The informal sector accounts for approximately 60% of total employment in our country. Madam Speaker, this glaring inequality in Jamaica has been worsened by COVID-19. As I highlighted earlier, the pandemic has disproportionately impacted the lower socioeconomic segments of the society. Whatever gains have been made in the past are in danger of being permanently reversed. Too many of our people are left behind by the current model of development. It entrenches vulnerability and exclusion. Many just feel that, as so the thing said, that the system has nothing for them. There is precious little in the government's discourse, their narrative, or their approach to economic management which recognizes this excessive inequality as a serious problem. The PNP has always rejected the trickle-down approach to national development. We realize that if Jamaica stays on the path of lopsided, inequitable development, the hopelessness and despair of too many of our people will continue and only get worse. The time has come, Madam Speaker, to treat the level of inequality in Jamaica as a separate crisis and to proactively rebalance the scales. So what is our vision for Jamaica? Madam Speaker, Jamaica needs a vision which embraces our possibilities as a great people, a clear definition of the kind of country we want to build. With the benefit of definition, we contest every action against that clear picture of what we're trying to do. There is no doubt that the state is in a stronger financial position due to the fiscal progress made steadily since 2013. The successes from the purposeful implementation of the reforms in the 2013 to 2018 IMF programs were built on the sacrifices of the Jamaican people. We must ensure that these sacrifices are not in vain. Those successes, Madam Speaker, must be used to build a society where all Jamaicans, of every class, colour or creed, have a place and feel a sense of hope and belonging, where all Jamaicans enjoy increased opportunities and an improved quality of life. Yes. Madam Speaker, Jamaica needs a different philosophy to guide policy. Yeah. It must be based on the principled pursuit of social justice and equality of opportunity. Social justice and equality are not just abstract concepts to be sung about in inspirational songs. They are essential principles in constructing a cohesive society, one that can flourish and meet the hopes and expectations of all our people. A society that works for all and not just a few. We need to build a more inclusive Jamaica, Madam Speaker, with people at the center of policy development. We're all in this thing together, as the song says. The PNP is committed to a model of development which is balanced and in harmony with the fundamental principles of social justice and equality of opportunity. We are committed to the fundamental social and economic transformation that is needed to build a stable, caring society, a society in which all Jamaicans are treated as equal citizens. Our goal is to build a system through which sustainable growth and development can become a reality, a system that exists for the empowerment of the people. Madam Speaker, unless guided by this philosophy, economic growth will not lead to greater national prosperity. It will merely serve to enrich those who already have capital, while most Jamaicans are left to wonder why they cannot achieve their hopes and dreams in the land of their birth. Madam Speaker, some of the priorities of the next PNP administration in pursuing this social and economic transformation of which I speak will be as follows. Firstly, land, housing and community reinvestment. The PNP has always been committed to providing land and housing for the majority who are excluded from ownership and access. It was Norman Manley's administration in the 1950s which offered the first national land reform policy to provide land for shelter and farming to the broad masses of our people. This saw the construction of Harbour View and Mona Heights at very concessional prices in response to the demand for affordable housing units. Then in the 1970s, Housing Minister Anthony Spalding led an unprecedented assault on landlessness and undignified shelter, evidenced by the delivery of over 60,000 houses and parcels of land to the working class and the poor. Prime Minister Michael Manley then created the National Housing Trust to provide low-income mortgages, and it became the most transformational institution in the housing sector in Jamaica. After 1989, we oversaw the construction of thousands of housing units with the creation of Greater Portmore, financed under the San Jose Accord with Mexico and Venezuela. And between 1995 and 2002, the Most Honourable P.J. Patterson's administration advanced the process of land tenure to first-time landowners with the provision of 30,010 titles and 28,000 letters of possession. Nevertheless, Madam Speaker, some 700,000 parcels of land in Jamaica still have no registered title. And this undermines the financing of agriculture and indeed all rural development. It has contributed to persistent poverty over generations. The impediments are complex, structural, and rooted in our history. Madam Speaker, our response to this will have to be innovative, involving profound legislative and administrative changes. Under Dr. Peter Phillips, we developed a far-reaching set of legislative proposals that will, for the first time, comprehensively tackle the intractable issues of land titling for our people. In addition to these reforms to facilitate easier land titling, we are also committed to two programs. Firstly, a major thrust in building affordable housing, and secondly, a program for empowering the occupants of dilapidated housing stock in inner city and rural communities to upgrade their homes. As a matter of policy, Madam Speaker, Jamaica cannot only provide housing for upper income earners. Naturally, that is where the greater profit lies, and no one can blame a developer for seeking out that segment of the market. The government must therefore be the architect of creative and proactive policies that encourage developers to serve the chronically underserved segment of the market for low-income people. Our Shadow Minister of Finance has outlined what we have in mind for incentivizing developers to invest in building affordable housing for low-income earners. It will take a strategic approach by government in collaboration with the private sector. Madam Speaker, we are also to commence a program for persons living in deplorable housing conditions. We will empower them to fix their leaking roofs, to restore their walls that are crumbling or their floors that are rotten, and to build their own bathrooms if they don't have one. We will do this by assisting them with the purchase of materials, while they make their own arrangements for the tradesmen and labour from within their communities. This program will facilitate the upgrading of the dilapidated housing stock in which too many Jamaicans now live. It will create a sense of achievement and progress in their lives, and the comfort of better and more secure living conditions. It will also provide an economic stimulus in these communities, with local tradesmen, labourers and hardware merchants benefiting from the investment that the people will be making in upgrading their homes. Madam Speaker, it really does Jamaica little credit that many depressed areas were once stable communities which ennobled our nation in sports, culture and scholarship. My constituency of South St. Andrew has produced boxing champions such as Bonnie Grant and Percy Hales, the brilliant West Indian batsman and all-rounder really Collie Smith, the immortal whalers comprising institution Boys Town is in my constituency. The immortal whalers comprising international musical icons Bob Marley, Peter Tosh and Bonnie Whaler, and the last two poet laureates of Jamaica, Professor Mervyn Morris and Lorna Goodison. We must rediscover that sense of excellence. Madam Speaker, we must rediscover that sense of excellence and discipline. It will take vision and commitment to rebuild communities like these, allowing their awesome human talent to flourish. We are also committed to ensuring that these communities are no longer relegated to second-class status when it comes to basic amenities like street lighting, garbage disposal, and water and sewage infrastructure. These public investments will be complemented by a Community Reinvestment Act, offering incentives to encourage businesses to set up in marginalized communities to provide goods and services to these large, underserved markets. Madam Speaker, community renewal must be pursued in a structured and deliberate way. It is by achieving community renewal that we will achieve national renewal. Madam Speaker, I want to say something about early childhood development. We intend to prioritize early childhood development, supported by a comprehensive policy to address the broader needs of children from birth onwards. Jamaica needs a system of early childhood development that gets all our children off to the right start. We know they are bright, and the nation will reap rich dividends from investing in them. We need to fill the gaps left by teenage pregnancy, single-parent homes, violence, and poverty. As we speak, basic schools are struggling to survive, with many closing under the weight of high operating costs, and I would say dwindling revenues as well. Jamaica must achieve the outcome that all our children are able to read, write, and do basic arithmetic by grade 4. Teaching must be supported by proper nutrition and enhanced by exposure to the social skills and wholesome values that are fundamental to citizenship. Madam Speaker, Jamaica has reached a point where there must be a comprehensive national program to engage and reorient the lives of so-called unattached youth and set them on the pathway of hope for a better life. Our youths need mentorship, life skills, the building of self-esteem, and a sense of citizenship. This must involve vocational training, a chance at remedial education, and an opportunity to know what it is like to work in a job. This program must be holistic in its approach and realistic in addressing the needs of the youths so they stay the course and benefit from full participation. Madam Speaker, the financing of tertiary education needs to be transformed, especially for young people whose parents just don't have it. The state, and not the student, must bear the risk of employment creation in the economy. The next PNP government will reconfigure the loan structure used by the Student Loan Bureau so as to cap monthly payments at a reasonable percentage of actual income of the borrower to ensure that it is manageable for young graduates, whatever their income, even if it's zero. We will ensure that borrowing a student loan to invest in their education is something that students no longer fear. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance announced last week that only one guarantor will be required by the Student Loan Bureau going forward. This is a welcome step in the right direction, but it does not go far enough. When the Public Accounts Committee recently looked at the Student Loan Bureau, we found that the amounts recovered from guarantors are quite small in the scheme of things, which suggests that the retention of this requirement is not necessary for the sustainability of the institution. We know that many potential student loan applicants from low-income homes cannot find an acceptable guarantor. The requirement of finding a guarantor works against children from low-income families. The next PNP government will abolish altogether the requirement of finding a guarantor to access student loans. Madam Speaker, I wish to say something now about modernizing and strengthening the Jamaican economy. We see broadband internet as a 21st century utility. We are committed to ensuring full access to the Jamaican people, like we did in the 1970s for electricity with the Rural Electrification Program. Our Shadow Minister of Finance has spoken to our plans to bring broadband internet to all Jamaicans. Madam Speaker, we are committed to increasing the efficiency and productivity of our economy by modernizing Jamaica's commercial architecture. Jamaica's bureaucratic processes are often arbitrary, frustrating, and onerous. This is a major contributor to the high levels of informality in the Jamaican economy. The next PNP administration will, once again, bring focus to improving laws and re-engineering bureaucratic procedures which impact businesses in Jamaica. In particular, we will minimize the bureaucratic requirements applicable to start-up businesses and micro and small businesses so as to minimize the red tape and costs that are now a major disincentive to formalization. Madam Speaker, these concerted efforts will enhance Jamaica's status in the international ease of doing business and competitiveness rankings. And we have a proven track record of performance in this regard. The last PNP administration did the substantial work necessary to pass major pieces of legislation in this area, such as the Security Interest in Personal Property Act, which established a new web-based collateral registry and a modern framework of laws to support secured borrowing. We passed the Insolvency Act to replace the old system from the 1800s with a modern bankruptcy code which prioritizes the rehabilitation of businesses that face financial difficulties. And thank God that legislation is in effect now when so many businesses have their backs to the wall. We also introduced a single form for the registration of companies and businesses, which provides the required tax and statutory numbers up front via a simple and fast process. Madam Speaker, as a result of these and other achievements, In 2015, Jamaica's ease of doing business ranking improved from 94th in the world to 58th in the world in 1 year. By contrast, since 2016 until now, despite operating in an improved fiscal climate, the record of this government has been quite poor, with Jamaica's world ranking slipping from 58th in 2015 to 71st in 2020, and I have a chart in the written text that shows the annual scores. Madam Speaker, we also remain committed to strengthening Jamaica's global position as a logistics hub and driving economic efficiency through strengthening our logistics-centered economy. The key elements of this will be, firstly, the build-out of the national digital infrastructure, of which I've spoken. Secondly, the establishment of a logistics council, bringing together the core logistics associations to inform government policies affecting logistics in the country. And those core agencies are the Shipping Association, the Port Authority, freight forwarders, and customs brokers. Thirdly, the implementation of the customs bill, now before Parliament. And lastly, the implementation of the Logistics Hub Initiative, Market Analysis and Master Plan, which was commissioned by the last PNP administration when the member for Western St. Andrew was minister, and was accepted by this administration, but with very little effort to promote it so far. Madam Speaker, I also want to say something about the ganja industry. This industry can assist in economic recovery of Jamaica, providing much-needed foreign exchange and creating employment. Our reform in 2015 to the Dangerous Drugs Act was transformational. It decriminalized personal possession and use of ganja, thereby reducing arrests and prosecutions by over 10,000 Jamaicans per year. It recognized Rastafari and their sacramental rights to cultivate and use ganja for the first time in any Jamaican legislation. And Bonnie Wheeler Jabi recently passed, and I want to honor his memory as a man from Trenchtown in my constituency. It also created a platform on which a new medical cannabis industry could be built and is being built. That was back in 2015, Madam Speaker. It is now time to go further. We will take the law relating to the lawful cannabis industry out of the Dangerous Drugs Act altogether. We will enact a Cannabis Industry Development Act to support the inclusive development and growth of this industry. And Madam Speaker, in doing so, we will overhaul the current system of regulation that has been developed by the Cannabis Licensing Authority. We will ensure inclusion of small farmers who are now effectively excluded from the lawful industry. We will reduce barriers to entry for them and support them by encouraging cooperatives that are linked to well-capitalized processors, supplying small farmers with the best inputs and technology to grow and sell back high-quality and safe medical ganja at fair prices. And Madam Speaker, since 2015, households have had the right to grow up to 5 plants of ganja for medicinal, therapeutic, or even horticultural purposes. We will empower householders to monetize this benefit, and I want to thank the member for Southwest St. Andrew for this idea. We will empower householders to monetize this benefit by allowing them to sell their ganja to licensed processors and retailers, creating an important new economic opportunity to supplement the income of Jamaican households. Madam Speaker, we will also promulgate new regulations to enable the Rastafari community to reap economic benefits from the cultivation and use of their sacramental herb. The law already allows the Minister of Justice to make these regulations, but it still has not happened. Madam Speaker, the PNP pioneered ganja reform in the 20s. You just lack imagination, Minister, that's the problem. The PNP pioneered ganja reform in 2015. We are fully committed with the necessary knowledge and skills to make the industry work for the empowerment and enrichment of ordinary Jamaicans. Madam Speaker, I want to speak to our commitments to the workers of Jamaica. Our party emerged in 1938 out of the historic labour protests of that year and has maintained a close relationship with the labour movement ever since. Our first party president and national hero, the Right Excellent Norman Washington Manley, founded the National Workers' Union, which remains an important affiliate of our party. It was Michael Manley who said in this House on July 15, 1970, that, and I quote, "It is in the totality of your social security and labour legislation system that you discover the true anatomy of the nation's conscience." That man could speak. Pro-worker legislation passed by PNP and governments include the Labour Relations and Industrial Disputes Act, which established the Industrial Disputes Tribunal to provide greater access to employment justice for workers. The Employment Termination and Redundancy Payments Act, which ensure that workers who are unjustifiably terminated or made redundant have clear rights to fair compensation. The Employment Equal Pay for Men and Women Act, ensuring that women and men earn the same pay for substantially the same work. The Maternity Leave Act, so that pregnant mothers get time off work to have their babies without losing pay and benefits. And more recently, Madam Speaker, the Employment Flexible Work Arrangements, Miscellaneous Provisions Act, which enables workers not to be tied to the traditional 9-to-5 working day, but they can negotiate more flexible work arrangements with employers without losing benefits. Madam Speaker, we remain committed to advancing the cause of working people in Jamaica, and there remains important work to be done. In doing so, we will not be harming the interests of owners of capital. Rather, we are promoting a more equitable and mutually beneficial relationship between both capital and labour. The next PNP government will pursue a series of reforms to ensure greater fairness at work, improve industrial harmony in the country, and increase productivity and competitiveness in our economy. I want to speak to a few of these reforms. Madam Speaker, the prevalent use of repeating fixed-term contracts and the fiction of independent contracting where there's no real independence have too often become mechanisms to sidestep the basic guaranteed package of worker rights and benefits. This is not fair to workers, and it deprives the social protection system of Jamaica, the NIS, the NHT, and HART, of significant funding, and it ends up costing the state heavily in the long run. Madam Speaker, these mechanisms need to be examined by all social partners with a view to having them properly organised for the benefit of all. The next PNP government will bring legislation to eliminate abusive contractual devices as a means of circumventing employment rights and ensure that the equal treatment of workers, regardless of the legal form of their contracts, rules the day. Madam Speaker, the sugar industry has gone through a severe and wrenching decline since the preferential trade arrangements ended some years ago. This has had a devastating effect in terms of falling living standards and the rise in violent crime and criminal gangs in communities across Jamaica, where the sugar industry was once the major employer. Arrangements for the social and economic transition of these communities have been ad hoc and inadequate. The most recent egregious example was the forced removal of long-term residents of Innswood sugar lands by the government to facilitate a sale to private developers without proper location arrangements having been put in place for the people affected. I went there and I saw it for myself, so you can say what you want to say. I saw it for myself. Madam Speaker, we will establish a commission. We will establish a commission to examine the situation faced by the communities in former sugar areas and develop a comprehensive plan for the economic revitalization of those communities. The objective is to provide new employment and entrepreneurial opportunities for displaced sugar workers, cane farmers and their families to earn an honest living and to live in dignity. Madam Speaker, we would like to see joint industrial councils established in those industries where there are high levels of employment but without common standards for working conditions and which are without union representation. The security guard industry is a case in point. Security guards comprise the largest group of security workers, larger than the police force and the military combined. But while some security companies have made strides in introducing enlightened employment practices, others lag behind in the areas of pension benefits, medical benefits, vacation leave, and maternity leave. Joint industrial councils provide a mechanism for addressing these issues in a cohesive way for the long-term benefit of the industry and the overall economy. And it's not just the security guard industry, there are other important industries to which this would also apply. Madam Speaker, I move to the issue of minimum wage. Jamaica's approach to setting the minimum wage dates back to 1938 and needs to be reviewed and modernized. As it stands today, the minimum wage really bears no meaningful connection to the actual cost of living for a Jamaican household with a single breadwinner. It is time to transition to the concept of a livable wage as a floor on earnings. Madam Speaker, the arguments against this usually focus on fears that some employers may cut back on workers and that the cost to the state through outsourcing arrangements will increase to accommodate higher wages. On the other hand, Madam Speaker, the great benefits to the society from requiring a livable wage across the board tend to be ignored. It will improve the standard of living at the base of the society. It will reduce child poverty. It will reduce inequality. It will build social cohesion, and it will stimulate aggregate demand to promote inclusive economic growth. Madam Speaker, we are also committed to enacting paternity leave legislation to encourage responsible fatherhood and stronger Jamaican families. We introduced maternity leave in the 1970s. The time has come to extend it to responsible fathers who want to play a central role in the upbringing of their children. Madam Speaker, in 1993, we passed legislation to provide incentives for the establishment of employee share ownership plans, referred to as ESOPs. I was very involved in that program at the time. I was a young lawyer, Madam Speaker, and it was one of the first assignments I got when I was a young associate with one of Jamaica's leading firms. A special unit was established within the tax department to facilitate applications by companies to set up employee share ownership plans. Several companies made use of the legislation, and in due course, this created substantial wealth for their employees at all levels, from the bearer and janitor right up to the CEO. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, that momentum was not maintained. We are committed to reviewing and simplifying this legislation and resuming the promotion of employee share ownership as part of a deliberate strategy to broaden ownership in the Jamaican economy. Madam Speaker, the last point I want to make about labour relates to a recent decision of the Ministry of Labour. The Ministry issued a directive, I think it was in February, that says that based on its interpretation of a recent Supreme Court decision, the Industrial Disputes Tribunal, the IDT, cannot adjudicate on whether or not an employee has been unjustifiably dismissed for redundancy. We understand that this matter may be appealed. Whatever the outcome in the courts, Madam Speaker, our position is that no such loophole should be allowed to stand, and the Act must be amended to make it pellucidly clear that the IDT can invigilate any ground of dismissal to determine whether or not it is unjustifiable. We are serious about protecting workers, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I now turn to crime and violence and our approach to dealing with that. Madam Speaker, violent crime has been a major cause of Jamaica's economic underperformance for decades. According to the World Bank, crime results in direct costs to Jamaica of nearly 4% of GDP, and there are estimates that put it higher than that, which is already higher than most other countries in the world. It is therefore surprising that the Minister of Finance had nothing much to say about crime in his budget presentation. He spoke for nearly 4 hours. The human toll of violent crime in Jamaica is also severe. Apart from the tragic impact on victims, their families and friends, it depresses national morale and undermines our hopes and aspirations for the future. Jamaica has been burdened with an exceptionally high violent crime rate for decades. The causes of this are complex and include the impact of transnational organized crime, local criminal gangs, poor social conditions in many communities, and dysfunctional aspects of our culture, which are sometimes legitimized in the popular culture. Madam Speaker, international best practice confirms that a balanced approach using both crime control as well as crime prevention measures yields the best long-term results in the sustained reduction of violent crime. That is why the last PNP administration launched the Unite for Change initiative in 2013, which involved educating citizens on the root causes of the epidemic of violence, igniting their passion, energies, and commitment to reversing it, and creating pathways to move people from concern to action. The Unite for Change initiative, along with the CSJP3 program, sought to institutionalize crime prevention approaches within Jamaica's national security strategy. Regrettably, Madam Speaker, the Unite for Change initiative was discontinued by the current government when it assumed office in 2016. Since then, social interventions have been minimized or abandoned in favor of what I describe as an authoritarian or tough policing approach, but without any clear dividends. Under the Holness administration, the force strength of the military, the JDF, is growing rapidly, and on its current trajectory could exceed the police force within a few years. The police force is not growing at anything like that pace. In fact, our understanding is that it's shrinking. The states of emergency were used as a routine crime-fighting tool for 3 years in various parts of Jamaica between 2017 and 2020, allowing the military to operate autonomously of the police, and more importantly, allowing citizens to be detained without charge for indefinite periods. This use of states of emergency ceased when the Supreme Court ruled that such use is unconstitutional. It had been temporarily brought to an end for the elections, but the court case decided that that was unconstitutional shortly after that. And Madam Speaker, the capital budget of the military has far outstripped that of the police force. And I have a chart that shows the relative capital allocation in the budgets between the police and the military over this period. Madam Speaker, notwithstanding consistent and well-funded messaging promoting this approach, this militarized approach, there is empirical evidence of the failure of these measures, and I will list some of them. In 2020, Jamaica had the highest homicide rate in the Western Hemisphere, at 46.5 people per 100,000 being murdered. Statistics up to March this year show that murders at 294, and I see in today's paper that it's actually now 303 people who have been murdered. But on March the 13th, that was the figure. And shootings at 273 continue at an unacceptably high rate, increasing by 6% in the case of murders and 8% in the case of shootings, relative to the same period in 2020 last year. The clear-up rate for murder is very low, 32%, showing weakness in intelligence and investigative capabilities. This has worsened, Madam Speaker, as a result of the over-reliance on the extraordinary detention powers provided by states of emergency in the 2017 to 2020 period. You see, having detained suspects using the power of the state of emergency is really a lazy form of policing. The state did not build a case against the vast majority of the people who were detained, and all of them were ultimately released, having been spent very long times in incarceration in some instances. Madam Speaker, the 2019 Crime Victimization Survey shows that the percentage of persons who feel safe walking at night in their communities has fallen from 81% in 2015 to 69% in 2018-19. And, Madam Speaker, the average number of murders each year under this government has substantially exceeded the average annual figure during the PNP administration of 2012 to 2016. And there's a chart which shows this graphically in my presentation. I'll just hold it up for the benefit of anyone who may want to see it. This is the PNP here, and this is Labour in murders. Madam Speaker, this terrible record of performance is remarkable given the extraordinary powers provided to the security forces by the states of emergency, and the vastly increased resources available to national security due to the success of this fiscal program since 2013. Our belief is that adequate resources through social investment for crime prevention are central to any efforts for sustained violence reduction. Jamaica's best hope is to tackle the major root causes of violent crime in a systematic way, while also properly equipping the security forces and the justice system with the tools, technology, and human resources required to carry out their work. Madam Speaker, we cannot be successful doing one without the other. The PNP is committed to a balanced approach with well-designed preventative measures, including training and development and deployment of violence interrupters under the Peace Management Initiative, a great program which has been allowed to languish and underfunded and has been underfunded under this government. Restorative justice, actively promoted by the Ministry of Justice and used extensively in the justice system. School-wide positive behavioral intervention support, school-wide, through the Ministry of Education. Specific interventions aimed at keeping youth in school and post-secondary employability training. Positive parenting to mitigate against children adopting criminal behavior. And incarceration, that means prison, being used primarily as an opportunity for rehabilitation rather than only for punishment. Madam Speaker, there is now, with this pandemic, an opportunity to reset our approach and return to a balanced methodology to reducing crime via the mechanisms of the Crime Consensus Plan and the Crime Management Oversight Committee. The opposition was instrumental in the establishment of these mechanisms in 2019, and we are committed to supporting them. However, their success will require honesty and transparency, both between the main political parties and with the broader public. Madam Speaker, I now want to say something about Jamaica's place in the world. Jamaica has a long history of advocacy for a more just and equitable world, based on unyielding adherence to principle and the rule of international law. Over the years, this elevated our country to a position of admiration and respect on the world stage. It enhanced our influence with our peers, and we were able to leverage the goodwill to help our country get through times of adversity. Being a small country, Madam Speaker, we have always had an internationalist posture, seeing our future as bound up with countries with a similar past and facing common challenges. There are many issues where the fortunes of our people can be enhanced by a progressive foreign policy or can be undermined by opportunistic maneuvers that are inconsistent with our tradition of standing by principle at all times. We have also long recognized the strategic benefits of speaking with a common voice with our CARICOM colleagues in dealing with larger players in the international arena. Madam Speaker, it was therefore with considerable alarm and disappointment that we witnessed this government departing from these traditions in its dealings with the Trump administration. Sadly, Jamaica chose to participate in the fragmentation of CARICOM's stance within the OAS, the Organization of American States, in relation to Cuba and Venezuela, rather than standing in principled solidarity with the majority of CARICOM states. Madam Speaker, Cuba and Venezuela are two countries whose generosity to the Jamaican people is unsurpassed. Prior to this, Jamaica had dealt with them from a position of respect for the principles of self-determination and non-interference in each other's internal affairs. The government's departure from the established norms of Jamaica's foreign policy and from the sure road of CARICOM solidarity is highly regrettable. It was also pursued with a lack of transparency and without full disclosure to the Jamaican public. Madam Speaker, PNP administration would never have embarked on that slippery slope. Never. We know that it cannot be prudent in the long run to depart from well-established principles that have served us well over many decades. Those principles had built Jamaica's prestige around the world. That is who we were a leader within CARICOM, and a sovereign, principled, and respected state on the global stage. Madam Speaker, many Jamaicans were ashamed to hear Prime Minister Andrew Holness declare openly on an American news channel that Jamaica understands the orbit in which we are. We are in the backyard of the United States. No, sir. What is this? Jamaica is not in anybody's backyard, Madam Speaker. We are no puppet or stooge to any foreign power. We are not for sale. As my commander once courageously said, we walk on the world stage on our feet and not on our knees. Madam Speaker, with the advent of a new and more progressive administration in Washington, the government's unfortunate dance with the Trump administration has been laid bare. Let us hope that Jamaica's prospects have not been blighted by the departure from our long and noble tradition of upholding Caribbean solidarity. And Madam Speaker, I wish to pay tribute to those CARICOM leaders who stood firm in the face of whatever pressures or inducements were offered to those like Jamaica who strayed from the fold. We say, powerful together. Madam Speaker, I wish to say something about constitutional reform. Our Constitution is a construct of the minds who conceived it in the run-up to independence. At that time, Jamaica was just emerging from centuries of colonial rule, and the world was a very different place. The Constitution should not be made to congeal in its original form. It should be a living document which reflects the stage we have reached on our national journey and assists us to make further progress with nation building. Jamaica has produced leaders like our revered national heroes who played their part in getting us to where we are now as a nation. Surely, Madam Speaker, we owe it to these heroes to complete the circle of our independence so that all our symbols and institutions are legitimately and proudly our own. Surely, Madam Speaker, the time has come for Jamaica now to cut the link with the English monarchy and become a republic within the Commonwealth. Madam Speaker, my understanding is that the two sides have been at one with this for many years, arising out of the constitutional reform process of the 90s and first decade of this millennium, this century. But what is important is to deal with it. It cannot be right for this country with its history of struggle against oppression, nor can it be consistent with our national self-image and pride for Jamaicans to continue to pay allegiance to such an important symbol that does not and cannot by definition reflect and have meaning to the vast majority of our people. Madam Speaker, this is a fundamental matter of national identity and self-belief. It really has nothing to do with the respect that is due to the reigning monarch in England, who is indeed respected and held in high esteem across the world. The important process of repatriating our sovereignty, which began in 1962, has stalled, and there is important unfinished business. The time has come for Jamaica to become a republic within the Commonwealth, with a Jamaican head of state, and for us to swear allegiance to the Constitution and people of Jamaica. Let us proceed with the legal steps required to achieve this, since there is consensus that this is where we need to go. Let us, in this House, debate the Member of Parliament, Michael Phillips' private member's motion, reaffirm our joint commitment to replacing the monarchy, and then move the process forward. Madam Speaker, let us also enshrine in the Constitution another homegrown institution of democracy of which we can all be proud, and that has served the country well, the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, the ECJ. We did it for local government in 2014, and we should do it for the ECJ now. Madam Speaker, we also believe strongly in the importance of providing greater access to the highest level of justice for the Jamaican people by moving from Her Majesty's Privy Council to the Caribbean Court of Justice as our final court of appeal. However, the consciousness of the other side is not there yet. So let us begin with the things that we can agree on and move forward. Madam Speaker, There is a fundamental difference between the policies and approaches of our party and the other. It is reflected in our history, our traditions, our orientation, and our objectives. We are the party which opened up secondary education to thousands by introducing the common entrance exam. Before that, secondary education had been the domain of the privileged few. We are the party that made Jamaica the first country in the Western Hemisphere to introduce sanctions against the racist apartheid regime in South Africa. We are the party that achieved rates of economic growth in the 1950s, among the top 3 countries of the world in that era. We are the party which eliminated the vile notion of bastardy and ensured that Jamaican children have equal status and rights under the law. The bastard not there again. We are the party which strengthened the rights of workers by supporting collective bargaining and establishing the IDT. We gave women the right to equal pay for equal work. We gave women the right to paid maternity leave. And Madam Speaker, when it comes to infrastructure, we are the party which built the East-West Highway and the North Coast Highway from the Grill in the west all the way to Port Antonio in the east, and which commenced and ensured completion of the North Coast Highway. The North-South Highway. We expanded our airports and seaports. We transformed telecommunications and internet services. We took Jamaica's infrastructure to a whole new level of development. We are the party, Madam Speaker, which rescued Jamaica from the brink of financial ruin in 2013 and restored the public finances to a sustainable path, successfully assuring the economic future of Jamaica. And Madam Speaker, we did this without any social dislocation or unrest. Itself an amazing achievement. Madam Speaker, we are the party which decriminalized the personal use of ganja, so that many thousands of youths no longer have a criminal record and cannot be thrown in jail for smoking a spliff. Madam Speaker, we have a proud history of empowering the Jamaican people, and we are committed to continuing that journey for the betterment of all. I conclude this afternoon by reciting the immortal words of our national hero, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, when he said, and I quote, "The ends you serve that are selfish will take you no further than yourself, but the ends you serve for all in common will take you even into eternity." God bless Jamaica. Land we love.
Madam Speaker, a very spirited presentation by the Leader of Opposition. It is not intended to do any further business for the day. Madam Speaker, I therefore move that the debate on the Appropriations Act be suspended until Thursday, March 18. When the most honorable Prime Minister will make his presentation. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Members, the question is that the debate on the appropriation bill be suspended until Thursday the 18th, when the Honourable Prime Minister will address the Parliament. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. This Parliament is now adjourned until Thursday the 18th.
You don't see the thing on social media. No. You need to pressure to respond.
Watch the 2021 budget debates on PBCJ and find out how much money the government plans to spend on security, roads, water, housing, and other services. The action kicks off with Minister of Finance and the Public Service Dr. Nigel Clarke on March 9. Opposition spokesman on Finance, Planning and the Public Service, Mr. Julian Robinson, will speak on March 11. Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Mark Golding, will speak on March 16. Prime Minister Andrew Holness will address the House on March 18. And the Minister of Finance and Public Service, Dr. Nigel Clarke, will close the debate on March 23. That's the 2021 budget debates on PBCJ, the People's Station.
Hi, I'm Eliana Charles, and I'm here with my father, Pernell Charles, and today